All right, gals and guys, let's get back into it. Where are we? How much do we have in? Still have one. So I'll wait for some of you all to come in. Okay, guys and gals and gals and guys. So let's continue. We're on slide number. Right, so we're on slide number 27. Classical perspectives of management. And when you hear classical management, there are some people that should come to mind. One person is Frederick Taylor. The other person is Gilbrecht, which they are husband and wife team. Another is Henry Gant, and another is Harrington Emerson. And there are some other persons like Fayol and others as well. But we'll start off with. Sorry. All right, so Frederick Taylor, he looked at breaking up a job into the smallest possible pieces. You can imagine a task that is very simple. It can be boiling rice. And how do we boil rice? Breaking something, we're using a very simple example. How do we do that? By breaking it up into the smallest possible pieces. Getting the pot, getting water, measuring the rice, getting the stove lit. All of those things. So he spoke about breaking up the job into the smallest amount of pieces, the simplest pieces, and getting the most qualified persons to perform the job and train them to do it. Now, immediately, I am sure you can think of something that immediately comes to mind where you're thinking of breaking up a job into the smallest possible pieces and getting the most qualified employees to perform that job. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear this and you think about it and when you apply it to Trinidad and Tobago? What's the first thing that comes to mind? He spoke about using supervisors to monitor employees to be sure that they are following the methods prescribed and only use those employees who get the job done. Guys, tell me, what do you think of? What organization do you think of when you hear about Taylor, Mr. Frederick Taylor, breaking up the job into small pieces, getting the best employees to do each part, all right? Getting the most qualified employees to do each part, getting a supervisor to monitor these employees, and only using the best employees to get the job done. The government. Construction, Jahir, maybe not so much. CPEP, a little bit, yes. URP, a little bit. But Leandra said it all in terms of government. Health system, yes. KFC, KFC precious? Um, KFC, yes. KFC, when you look at KFC, they have fryer, they have some person cash in, then the same person cash in usually is go get your meal, and sometimes there's someone separate to get the meal. So yes, different ministries. I find, but nobody here gets into the real one that gets under our skin. Um, KP saying ministries, yes, ministries, but there's one in particular, or there's two in particular. Government have No, Jay is saying government have no train anything, have no training. Government don't train. Is that what you're saying, Jahil? So yes, different ministries, but which in particular that we see on a daily basis, which we see on a daily basis, we see this happening. So yes, so Jahil is correct in saying yes, CPEP. Teresa, you see it in health? Yes, I would agree that in health, yes, you have um, different people doing a particular job only. Um, so I would say yes, Teresa. I would say yes, Precious. Yes, Samantha C. Kavita P. Same ministry. So which ministry in particular, Kavita P? Leandra, which government agency in particular you're thinking of that you're thinking the same along the same lines as me? Which ones? Which ones? Which ones? Which ones really do affect us on a daily basis? Health and national security. Hmm. Kavita P. Sorry, but I'll have to take Jahil's answer. Works and transport. So next time you're on the road and you see them, yes, Shakila. Next time you're on the road and you see a Ministry of Works truck. Now I know some of you all have parents and uncles that work for the Ministry of Works. We're not saying anything bad about them. It's not a personal attack. This is from a management perspective. Remember all of these government ministries, and you all said them: works, health, security. Bradley said WASA. Yes, yes, WASA. So I was looking at WASA and I was looking at works. So they all, you would see the truck pull up. So there's a driver of a truck that sits in a driver's seat and does not move. There is the steamroller driver who sits on his steamroller and does not move. There are a few of the men who lays the material, and that's all they do. And then there is a supervisor that watches what they do, and that's it. A supervisor for the supervisor, right? So I want you all to pay attention. And similarly with WASA, you would see there is there are several people who would be standing there performing zero active functions, but they in their job spec they actually have a function that they are performing, and it definitely gives a clear sense of classical management and classical work, how it's getting done. Now compare that to a private organization that has, and I think I have the video on my Facebook page. Did I save it? No, I don't think I saved it. But I'm sure some of you would have seen a video that was going around recently of a Trinidadian guy who was in the States who was just amazed and in awe that there was this contractor that that was that was um, fixing a roadway that was damaged as a result of the digging up a water line or some sort of line, whether with water or heat or whatever it is. And they dug an area, and this contractor now came in and he had to completely restore the roadway as as though nothing happened. And you know what he said? He said, if they don't do that, they are now going to get fined a further $1,500. So there you have now a reward mechanism in place for high quality jobs to be done. Now, something you all probably don't know, but at each of these WASA sites where they are digging up a road, part of the team that is there is a quality control team. Imagine that. So you have WASA personnel coming in. That includes the laborers, the supervisors, the pipemen, the generator men, whatever the list of jobs that these guys are doing. And then you have a contractor that is coming in to now dig and fill up the hole and to provide equipment support. And then you have a quality person, part of the WASA team, to make sure that that job is done properly. Clearly, when you look at it, you might ask yourself, perhaps this quality person's role is to ensure WASA's part was done properly and not the restoration part, but that isn't true, I found out. It's simply that person has the responsibility to ensure that the road also is restored to spec the way they got it. Now, yes, you might argue, well, you already have bad roads, so it don't make sense to fixing back a bad road. But for those that are quality persons don't go to work, it's clearly not a yes. It's Guy Shakila and Kavita P clearly, and I've been saying, perhaps any political party that can solve the problem of WASA restoring a road the way they got it or restoring it to spec will get my vote, because that's a simple problem that seems to not be able to be fixed. Clearly, it's something that has a lot more at stake and a lot more things going around, which is why it is in the state that it is in. But I'm using this to show that we still have classical management at play in 2020 at our government ministries, because our government ministries came from a colonial time. They have colonial influences. I think I mentioned in one of the classes that that's because there is security of tenure, and you have gratuity, and you have pensions, and you have sick leave, and you have um, sick leave, casual leave, and you have vacation, all of those things. And you also have with it this construct of inefficiency, or that would have led to this construct of inefficiency as a result of these individual persons having individual roles that are not multitasking. All right, so I hope everyone appreciates the point, and I urge you all to please pay attention when you go on the roads next time to a Ministry of Works team that's fixing a road, if they ever do, and to a WASA team that is actually now, when you pass, hopefully you see them now starting to dig, and when you pass back, hopefully you'll see the condition that the road was left in, and you'll see clearly that something something just doesn't make sense. Something is clearly inefficient. The end result clearly doesn't matter to these guys, right? Good. And Gilbert and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Gilbert, they looked at um, more efficient ways to produce output. Um, they looked at a changing an 18-step process into a 5-step process and increasing productivity. Henry Gantt, he introduced the Gantt chart, and I'm sure we all are friends with Google, and you all are friends with the internet, so you all could look at what a Gantt chart is like. It's still used today to schedule work in the energy industries and in other industries as well. And then Emerson spoke about specialized management roles in organizations. So those are some names: Frederick Taylor, Gilbert, Henry Gantt, Harrington Emerson. Those are some persons who would have been the first group of people that would, create the theories of classical management. And moving on to slide number 33, we talk further about Frederick Taylor, and he spoke about scientific management. Um, his time and motion studies, how to get more out of workers. He introduced the term piecework, and piecework is still existing today in industries that are production based, where they're producing clothing material. This will definitely apply in those countries that are making our clothes, piecework. So how you get paid for how much t-shirts you produce, or how much trousers you produce, etc. Um, and Taylor Mr. Taylor had in his mind that the worker can't think, and only the manager can break down the job and tell the worker how to do the job. So it's a very old perspective on productivity and on management. And believe it or not, in some of the older uh, family-run type businesses, the older ones, you would still see this type of interaction where the owner of the business or the manager of the business would be, yes, Jahil, there is a role for it in the modern workplace. There is a role, a limited role, but there is a role, and there's a role for this with guidance on how things are done. Because the reality is that classical management and scientific management is structured, and we all need structure to function. We are not operating in a jellyfish type or a jello type environment that has no structure. We need structure to get things done. Structure is linked and meshed with being organized. So yes, Jahid, to answer your question quickly, yes, we can still use this in the workplace. All right. So getting back to Mr. Taylor, he's again saying um, only the manager can analyze and break down the task in such a way where you can pay people on a piecework payment plan. The manager does no labor, the manager only does thinking, which is very different to how today's new management is done. He felt that if you let a worker do the thinking, the job would not come out as good as someone who's a specialist in thinking. Now, we all know today that all of us were born with a brain, and all of us have the ability to think critically, especially if they have been given the right environment or given the opportunity. So, whilst we do want a workforce that can come in and follow your instructions to get a particular job done, especially if time is against you and you need to get something done, we don't have time to brainstorm further. I already have another team that did the brainstorming, and this is what we want to get done. Um, but we know for a fact that in today's world, if you do that in isolation, you might rob yourself of an opportunity to see a perspective that that group of thinkers didn't see at all. And you'd be surprised that maybe your group of doers, your group of employees, may see something that is very relevant, very true, and without their opinion being recognized, you can have some problems. So, again, old thinking is the worker cannot think, the worker cannot only does, and they would not figure out the best way to get the task done. So, Frederick Taylor was being very scientific, but he was not fully appreciative of the skills of everyone who is part of the team. And you would see later on in the lecture, there are others that changed that. So he used his pig iron example of of workers moving 12 tons per day. And then when he did his biomechanical analysis and his time and motion studies, he now was able to get them to move 47 tons per day. So it does have a role. It does have a role in terms of efficiency. All right. Um, so he went on to apply scientific applications to his employees and use a stopwatch and tell them when to walk, when to breathe. It might sound crazy, it might sound stupid, but this is what he did. And this is where he got his results. Vikash is asking, is it that it's referring to competence and literacy rather than ability? Um, what you mean, Vikash? Is it that you're talking about competence and literacy of the workers? Is it the workers you're talking about? So if it is the workers, yes, it's an assumption. It's an assumption, it's an old assumption that the workers were not competent. There was an assumption that the workers were not literate. But remember, even if you are not literate, meaning that you can't read and write, or you don't have skills to, to be real analytical and critical. Sometimes you are able to get feedback. If it is you are the one doing this job all the time, you are able to see patterns and see trends, and you would realize that if you program your mind in such a way to just do a job and not think critically, then that's all you would see. You would just see the job. The job is to put these bricks from in a stack. Um, you would not be looking at putting it in, like as we say, platted, that it would be more stable in a platted format versus in a vertical format. Just a quick example to say that if you only think of your job as stacking bricks and not anything else and not critically think, then you're not going to find better ways in which it can be done. All right? So that's Taylor. Taylor was a scientific guy. Taylor looked at used biomechanical analysis, used time and motion studies to get the best out of his workers and to be able to pay them for the amount of work that they produced. Taylor is, as am emphasizing again, advocated for a strong division between management, which was the thinkers, and workers, which is the doers. And answering Jahil again, that still exists today and that still applies today. But in today's world, there is two-way communication. Historically, communication was one way. Manager thinks, talks to, we do have to do we could do it horizontal, talks to worker, and worker has no feedback. Worker just does. Worker does. Now, manager would talk to worker, and worker can give feedback. And this is where the difference is. So it does have an application in today's world, a limited one at that, but it does have an application in today's world. All right. Right. So Taylor continued on with his theories and suggested that he looked at more on the needs of the tasks rather than the needs of the persons doing the tasks. Right. So that's Taylor. Um, so whenever you hear of scientific management, I want you to think of a guy by the name of Frederick Taylor. So whenever you hear classical management, you're thinking of Taylor, which was the pioneer of scientific management, Henry Gant, Gilbert, and Emerson. And your readings online would definitely tell you some more about these guys. So bureaucratic organizations, and all of this came out of classical management. Over the turn of the last century, we already discussed what bureaucracy is like in terms of a government ministry, and a government ministry inheriting colonial influence or having colonial influences in the organization. Specification of jobs with detailed rights, obligations, and responsibilities. A system of supervision and subordination. Extensive use of written documents. And, you know, for those of you who have the experience, you all would know, but in ministries and in government agencies and in even some private enterprises that are very bureaucratic, there is extensive use of written documents. There's extensive written reports that has to be made because these reports are now part of evidence, are now part of justification of why something was done. So it's the It's the written documents is all part of something called, and we don't need to say the A part, right? CYA. We all know what CYA means, right? We don't need to say the A part. So tell me what CYA means. You can say the C and the Y. We know what the A part is. Just to make sure everybody is on the same page with me here with this. And use of written documents and the use of bureaucracy in organization is essentially for CYA. CYA, anyone? Google sticking again. Cover your right, Kavita P. Yes. Cover your yes, right. We know, yes. That's it. And that's very true. Because if you look at of any given random ministry, from the typist to the clerk one to the clerk two, or the if you look at any ministry, you know the structure is. Everything is about not taking responsibility individually, but passing on that responsibility to the structure. Understand what I'm saying? Because these organizations are very structured and very bureaucratic, there's no accountability, though. There's very little accountability. That's why in a government organization, people do so many things and can get away with it without consequence. And that's because the structure allows for that. It allows for those type of things. And you would look compare it to a private company where yes, documentation is needed to CYA, but there are real consequences because the structure in private organizations is not so complex and meshed and intertwined. Sometimes we actually say that bureaucratic organizations are deliberately designed to reduce accountability and deliberately designed to frustrate the user into at times, and I'll ask this question, bureaucracy can lead to too much. I can put this term too much. Too much bureaucracy can lead to what? Too much bureaucracy is a fertile ground for something. Too much bureaucracy can lead to, tell me guys, corruption, Kavita P, you're correct, failure, Jahil, failure, yes, and failure as a result of corruption. And failure leading to corruption. So it's so mixed. It's very much related. You have a bureaucratic organization that's so complex and so tough to maneuver and to navigate. It leads to failure. That failure now leads to corruption, leads to persons who are desperate and are willing to pay for a particular service, and then the operators of the organization might become tempted and might be incentivized by this corrupt offer. So yes, keep in mind your bureaucratic organization should not be so complex and so difficult to navigate that you are now facilitating corruption. Anybody want to give me an easy example for corruption in a government office? Go ahead and give me an easy example that we all supposed to be too familiar with. Licensing, live sport, yes. But licensing office is just so very much part of the culture. It's just like yeah, but so yes. Um, It's so very much part of just the culture. I remember when I was having to get my license so many years ago. It's a known fact, town and country. All right, Kavita P. Um, yes. Another one that immediately came to mind was long ago. I don't know if it still exists now. Um, Obtaining a firearm license is, they would tell you up front and in advance how much you have to pay to get it done. You can you can't buy R24. 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 Jahil, you and I think similarly. R24. Respect. Yes, so bureaucratic organizations cannot be designed to deliberately frustrate the user that would lead to corruption and failure. So, very good. I'm very happy to see that you all are on point with this. So, um, right? Bureaucracies, and we want to slide 42 now. Bureaucracies excel in businesses that involve routine tasks that are very specified and don't change quickly. Now, the reality is that yes, you can say some government ministries do have routine, everybody has routine tasks, right? But things do change quickly. There are things that are constantly changing and adjusting that will require you now to tweak and adjust the way you operate to facilitate these changes. But bureaucracies don't lend itself to that particular eventuality. All right. So the main focus of bureaucracy is on productivity of the individual worker. Well, imagine that the main focus of bureaucracy is on productivity of the individual worker, and we know for a fact that that doesn't apply to these government ministries that we're talking about. And then we're looking at some administrative principles when we look at classical management. And we introduce to you these guys, Henry Fayol, Mary Parker, and Chester Bernard. And there we're now talking about the, focusing on the total organization and not just the individual. Remember, Taylor looked only at the task at hand and not the individual, and looking at the individual only doing the thinking. These guys looked at the total organization, and you can see where we still have where we get some key features of our modern day management definition of planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, controlling, right? So Fayol was very similar to Taylor, and you would see Fayol's 14 principles of management: specialization of labor, authority, discipline, unity of direction, subordination of individual interests, and that's on slide 45. And this still has so much application in today's world, but it's also now looked at in consideration of emotional intelligence. This actually is a nice question for you guys. How does, in today's world, subordination of individual interest relate to and affect emotional intelligence? Because emotional intelligence is where your manager or your supervisor is now empathetic to your needs and your issues that are going on. But here we have Fayol and Taylor talking about keeping your individual interests at bay, and you come to work, you come to work, and that's something that still exists today. That we would encourage, we would encourage our staff to accept that, guys, when you come to work, you try your best and leave your problems at the door, whether be it your spouse, whether be it your kids, whether be it financial, and come in and work. And now that might sound very easy, but in reality, that's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to ask someone to stop worrying about their sick child, or to stop worrying about some debts that they have, or to stop worrying about problems they're having with their spouse and now come to work. That's you would realize, and there's so much data out here now to show it, that your mental state whilst at work influences your productivity. Your mental state whilst at work influences how many errors occur. All right. So it's important to understand that yes, you want persons to be focused, and but you also need to be emotionally intelligent. And perhaps the best strategy to deal with this is through emotional intelligence. You recognize that this person has issues, this person has some special considerations, this person may not be able to be at the front desk today. This person perhaps could engage in some tasks um, that do require them to be completely attentive. Well, that's not a good, that's a bad example because all tasks require attention. This person may can work in an area that may have lots of breaks involved. This person should work in an area where there is a group that is that can help lift their spirits or help them through their problems. So you need to be able to understand, yes, we want subordination of individual interest and for productivity, but you also must use emotional intelligence to ensure that your employee is well taken care of, and they are understood, and they are treated well enough to be able to get through their issues while still maintaining productivity at the workplace. All right, so give me a minute. Let me just switch here so I can plug in this laptop. Right. All right, so we good to go here. All right, so continuing on. Um, right, so Fields spoke about remuneration. Employees receive fair payment for services. Good. Mary Parker. Mary Parker talk about businesses. Businesses look at both owners and laborers have an interest where conflict can lead to domination or compromise, of which both sides lose. And we are going to look at conflict management. I suspect. Let me just make sure. Yes, we're going to be looking at conflict management later on in this course. So, Mary Parker Foley, she looked at conflict management, conflict occurring where you don't look at both owners and laborers together having a common interest. Right? She spoke about people being responsible for their work and not to someone only. So people, your employees taking full interest in their work and having a greater appreciation for the quality of work that they produce. And as a manager, you know your role is important in ensuring that these employees have full buy-in. They are fully bought into their job and their task at hand. Right? She spoke about the manager building relationships in which the workers see themselves as working with the manager rather than for the manager. So yes, you're immediately seeing now a transition from where Taylor was talking about that big gap between the manager and the worker. And now Mary Parker is now making that gap smaller and making the interaction now moving from one way into two-way communication. So it's about getting this Mary Parker. When you can look at her as a person who brought into the idea of getting full buy-in from your employees into the team, right? By getting feedback from your employees, um, would allow them to feel part of the process, to feel part of the organization, to know that they are working, as part of they are indeed part of the organization as well. All right. And she continued to talk about conflict resolution. If you look at slide number 47, uh, uh, conflicts are best resolved through integration of interests. And we would, as I said, we would look at conflict management later on in the course. Right? So it's integration, conflict resolution. Managers need workers, and workers need managers. Workers need managers for guidance and supervision, and for promotion and those things. And managers need workers to simply help get the job done, to increase in your capacity. So it's an interactive relationship. It's a necessary relationship. They both influence each other simultaneously. All right, so we have a few more slides. So let's go for a break, and then we shall complete today's lecture in the next hour. All right, break now. Return at 11:05.